It was a quiet afternoon in a small town, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone, and life moved at a slower pace. The sun was shining brightly, and the streets were calm, with only a few people out and about. Among them was a teenage boy, around 16 years old, who was walking home from school. He was an average kid, not particularly popular or athletic, but he had a good heart and a strong sense of right and wrong. He liked to keep to himself most of the time, but when he saw something unfair, he couldn't just stand by and do nothing. As he turned the corner onto Maple Street, he noticed an elderly couple struggling with their groceries. They were trying to carry several heavy bags from their car to their house, but it was clear they were having a hard time. The man was leaning heavily on a cane, and the woman was moving slowly, her hands trembling as she held onto the bags. The boy hesitated for a moment, unsure if he should step in. He didn't want to intrude or make them feel uncomfortable, but he could see they needed help. Finally, he decided to approach them. "Excuse me," he said politely, "do you need some help with those bags?" The elderly couple looked up, surprised but relieved. The man smiled warmly and nodded. "That would be very kind of you, young man," he said. The boy quickly took the bags from their hands, making sure to carry the heavier ones himself. He walked with them to their front door, making small talk along the way. The couple seemed grateful for the assistance, and they thanked him repeatedly. As they reached the house, the woman invited him inside for a glass of water. The boy hesitated again, not wanting to impose, but he could see they were genuinely appreciative. He followed them into their cozy living room, which was filled with old photographs and knickknacks that told the story of their long life together. The woman poured him a glass of water and offered him a seat. "You're such a kind young man," she said. Not many people these days would stop to help strangers. The boy shrugged modestly. "It was no trouble," he said. "I just saw you needed help, and I thought I'd offer." The couple smiled at him, and for a moment, there was a comfortable silence. Then the man spoke up. "You know, young man, kindness like yours is rare. It's good to see there are still good people in the world." The boy felt a warm glow inside, knowing he had done the right thing. After finishing his water, the boy stood up to leave. The couple thanked him again and told him to come back anytime. He waved goodbye and headed back out onto the street, feeling good about what he had done. He didn't think much more about it as he continued on his way home. It was just a small act of kindness, something he believed anyone would have done in his place. But the next day, something unexpected happened. The boy was walking to school when he noticed a large, black SUV parked in front of the elderly couple's house. It was an unusual sight in their quiet neighborhood, and it made him curious. As he got closer, he saw two men in suits standing on the porch, talking to the elderly couple. They looked serious, almost intimidating, and the boy couldn't help but wonder what was going on. He slowed down, trying to get a better look without being too obvious. The men in suits were handing something to the elderly couple, and the couple looked shocked but also relieved. The boy's curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to stop and ask if everything was okay. As he approached the house, one of the men in suits turned and looked at him. "Can I help you?" the man asked, his tone polite but firm. The boy hesitated, unsure of what to say. I just wanted to make sure everything was okay," he stammered. The elderly couple recognized him and smiled. "Oh, it's the young man who helped us yesterday," the woman said. She turned to the men in suits. "This is the boy I was telling you about. He's the one who helped us with our groceries." The men in suits exchanged a glance, and then one of them nodded. "We'll need to speak with you," he said to the boy. The boy's heart started to race. What was going on? Why did these men want to talk to him? He felt a mix of fear and curiosity as he followed them into the house. Once inside, the men in suits explained that the elderly couple had been the victims of a scam. Someone had been calling them, pretending to be from their bank, and had convinced them to hand over a large sum of money. The couple had been devastated, not only because of the financial loss but also because they felt foolish for falling for the scam. The men in suits were investigators who had been working on the case, and they had managed to recover the stolen money. The boy listened in shock. He had no idea that the kind elderly couple he had helped the day before had been going through such a difficult time. The investigators explained that they had been watching the neighborhood, trying to gather more information about the scam, and they had noticed the boy helping the couple. They wanted to thank him for his kindness and let him know that his actions had made a difference. The boy was speechless. He had never expected anything like this to happen. He had just been trying to help, and now he was being thanked by investigators for his small act of kindness. The elderly couple smiled at him, their eyes filled with gratitude. "You're a good person," the man said. "Never change." As the boy left the house, he felt a mix of emotions. He was relieved that the couple had gotten their money back, but he was also amazed at how something so small could have such a big impact. He realized that even the smallest acts of kindness could make a difference in someone's life, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose as he continued on his way to school. Little did he know, this was just the beginning of a series of events that would change his life in ways he could never have imagined. The mysterious SUV and the men in suits were just the first signs that something bigger was going on, and the boy was about to find himself at the center of it all. The boy couldn't stop thinking about what had happened as he walked to school. The image of the black SUV and the serious-looking men in suits kept replaying in his mind. He wondered who they were and why they had been so interested in him. He had just helped an elderly couple with their groceries. Why was that such a big deal? But deep down, he knew there was more to the story. The way the investigators had looked at him, the way they had thanked him, it all felt strange, almost like he had stumbled into something much bigger than he realized. When he got to school, he tried to focus on his classes, but his mind kept wandering. He couldn't shake the feeling that something unusual was happening. During lunch, he sat with his friends, but he was quieter than usual. One of his friends noticed and asked if everything was okay. The boy hesitated, unsure of how much to say. "I don't know," he said finally. "Something weird happened yesterday, and I can't stop thinking about it." His friends leaned in, curious. "What happened?" one of them asked. The boy explained how he had helped the elderly couple with their groceries and how the next day, he had seen the black SUV and the men in suits. His friends listened intently, their eyes widening as he described the investigators and the scam. "That's crazy," one of them said. "Do you think they're, like, FBI or something?" The boy shrugged. "I don't know. They didn't say. But it was definitely weird." His friends were fascinated, and they spent the rest of lunch speculating about what it all meant. The boy appreciated their interest, but he still felt uneasy. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something no one was telling him. After school, the boy decided to walk past the elderly couple's house again, just to see if anything else was going on. As he approached, he noticed that the black SUV was gone, and the street was quiet. He hesitated for a moment, then walked up to the front door and knocked. The woman answered, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Oh, it's you," she said. Come in, come in." The boy stepped inside, feeling a little awkward but also curious. The couple seemed happy to see him, and they invited him to sit down. "We wanted to thank you again for what you did," the man said. "You have no idea how much it meant to us." The boy nodded, still unsure of what to say. "I'm just glad I could help," he replied. The woman smiled warmly. "You're a good kid," she said. "Not many people your age would stop to help strangers like that." The boy felt a little embarrassed but also proud. He had never thought of himself as particularly special, but the way the couple talked about him made him feel like he had done something important. As they talked, the boy learned more about the scam that had targeted the couple. The man explained how they had received a phone call from someone claiming to be from their bank. The caller had told them that their account had been compromised and that they needed to transfer their money to a secure account to protect it. The couple, worried and confused, had followed the instructions, only to realize later that they had been tricked. "We felt so stupid," the woman said, her voice trembling. "We've always been careful, but they sounded so convincing." The boy listened, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. He couldn't believe that someone would take advantage of such kind and trusting people. "I'm so sorry that happened to you," he said. "But I'm glad the investigators were able to get your money back." The man nodded. "Yes, we're very lucky. But it's not just about the money. It's about knowing that there are still good people in the world, like you." The boy felt a lump in his throat. He had never thought of himself as a good person before, but hearing the couple say it made him realize how much small acts of kindness could mean to someone. As the boy got up to leave, the woman handed him a small envelope. "We wanted to give you this," she said. "It's just a little something to show our appreciation." The boy hesitated, not wanting to accept anything, but the woman insisted. "Please, take it. You've done so much for us." The boy took the envelope and thanked them. He didn't open it until he was outside, and when he did, he was shocked to find a handwritten note and a small amount of money. The note read, "Thank you for your kindness. You've reminded us that there is still good in the world. Please use this to do something nice for yourself." The boy felt tears welling up in his eyes. He had never expected anything like this, and it made him realize how much his small act of kindness had meant to the couple. As he walked home, the boy thought about what he would do with the money. He didn't want to spend it on himself, it felt wrong, somehow. Instead, he decided to use it to do something good for someone else. He wasn't sure what yet, but he knew he wanted to pay the kindness forward. That evening, as he sat at the dinner table with his family, the boy couldn't stop thinking about everything that had happened. His parents noticed he was quieter than usual and asked if everything was okay. The boy hesitated, then decided to tell them about the elderly couple and the investigators. His parents listened carefully, their expressions a mix of surprise and concern. "That's quite a story," his father said when he finished. "But I'm proud of you for helping them. Not many people would have done that." The boy felt a warm glow inside, knowing his parents were proud of him. But he still couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, something he didn't fully understand. As he lay in bed that night, the boy's mind raced with questions. Who were the men in suits? Why had they been so interested in him? And what had they meant when they said his actions had made a difference? He didn't have any answers, but he knew one thing for sure. His life had changed in ways he couldn't have imagined, and he was about to find out just how big those changes would be. The next few days passed in a blur for the boy. He went to school, did his homework, and spent time with his friends, but his mind was always elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about the elderly couple, the investigators, and the mysterious black SUV. He felt like he was standing on the edge of something big, something that could change his life in ways he couldn't yet understand. One afternoon, as he was walking home from school, he noticed the black SUV parked near his house. His heart skipped a beat. What were they doing here? He hesitated for a moment, then walked up to the vehicle. One of the men in suits stepped out and greeted him with a nod. "We've been waiting for you," the man said. "We need to talk." The boy felt a mix of fear and curiosity. "What's this about?" he asked. The man gestured for him to get into the SUV. "We'll explain everything," he said. The boy hesitated, unsure of what to do. He didn't know these men, and getting into a car with strangers didn't seem like a good idea. But something about the way they carried themselves made him feel like he could trust them. After a moment of hesitation, the boy got into the SUV. The man in the driver's seat glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "You've done something very important," he said. Something that's had a bigger impact than you realize. The boy's heart was pounding. What do you mean? He asked. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he drove to a nearby park and parked the car. The three of them got out and walked to a quiet bench. The man who had spoken earlier sat down and gestured for the boy to do the same. We're part of a special task force, he began. We've been investigating a network of scammers who target elderly people. Your actions the other day helped us make a breakthrough in the case. The boy listened intently, his mind racing. How? He asked. The man explained that the boy's act of kindness had drawn attention to the elderly couple, which had led the investigators to uncover a crucial piece of evidence. You showed us that there are still people who care, the man said. And that gave us the motivation we needed to keep going. The boy felt a mix of pride and confusion. He had just been trying to help, he hadn't realized it would have such a big impact. What happens now? He asked. The man smiled. Now, we need your help again, he said. We're close to bringing down the entire operation, but we need someone on the inside. Someone who can gain their trust. The boy's eyes widened. You mean, me? The man nodded. You've already shown that you have a good heart and a strong sense of right and wrong. We think you're the perfect person for the job. The boy felt a surge of emotions, fear, excitement, and a sense of responsibility. He had never done anything like this before, but he knew he couldn't say no. What do I need to do? He asked. The man explained that the boy would need to play the role of a concerned citizen who had been scammed by the same group. He would need to contact the scammers and gain their trust, then gather information that would help the investigators bring them down. It won't be easy, the man warned. But we'll be with you every step of the way. The boy took a deep breath. He knew this was a big responsibility, but he also knew he couldn't back down. I'll do it, he said firmly. The man smiled and patted him on the shoulder. We knew you would, he said. You're a brave kid. Over the next few days, the boy worked closely with the investigators to prepare for his role. They taught him how to act, what to say, and how to stay safe. It was a lot to take in, but the boy was determined to do his best. He knew that if he succeeded, he could help bring down a dangerous group of criminals and protect other innocent people from being scammed. Finally, the day came when the boy was ready to make contact with the scammers. He sat at his desk, his heart pounding as he dialed the number the investigators had given him. A man answered, his voice smooth and reassuring. The boy took a deep breath and began to speak, carefully following the script he had been given. Hi, I'm calling because I think I've been scammed, he said, his voice trembling slightly. The man on the other end of the line listened carefully, then began to ask questions. The boy answered as best he could, trying to sound scared and vulnerable. It wasn't hard, he was nervous, and it showed in his voice. After a few minutes, the man seemed convinced. Don't worry, he said. We'll help you get your money back. Just follow our instructions, and everything will be okay. The boy felt a surge of relief. He had done it, he had gained their trust. As he hung up the phone, the boy felt a mix of emotions. He was proud of himself for stepping up, but he also knew that the hardest part was yet to come. He would need to keep playing his role, gathering information, and staying one step ahead of the scammers. It was a dangerous game, but he was determined to see it through. That night, as he lay in bed, the boy thought about everything that had happened. He had started out just trying to help an elderly couple with their groceries, and now he was working with investigators to bring down a criminal network. It was more than he had ever imagined, but he knew he was doing the right thing. As he drifted off to sleep, the boy felt a sense of purpose. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: he was ready to face whatever came next. The next morning, the boy woke up with a knot in his stomach. Today was the day he would meet the scammers in person. The investigators had set up a meeting at a local coffee shop, and the boy was supposed to play his role as a victim who had been scammed. He felt nervous but determined. He knew this was his chance to make a real difference. As he got ready, he went over the plan in his head. He was supposed to act scared and vulnerable, like someone who had lost a lot of money and was desperate for help. The investigators had given him a script to follow, but they had also warned him to be ready for anything. The scammers were clever, and they might try to test him. When he arrived at the coffee shop, the boy spotted the man he had spoken to on the phone sitting at a corner table. He was dressed in a sharp suit and had a friendly smile, but the boy could see the coldness in his eyes. He took a deep breath and walked over to the table. "Hi," the boy said, trying to sound nervous. "Are you the person I spoke to on the phone?" The man smiled and gestured for him to sit down. "Yes, I am," he said. "Please, have a seat. I'm here to help you." The boy sat down, his hands trembling slightly. He could feel the man studying him, trying to figure out if he was genuine. He knew he had to be careful. One wrong move, and the whole plan could fall apart. The man began to ask questions, probing for details about the boy's supposed scam. The boy answered as best he could, sticking to the story the investigators had given him. He talked about how he had lost his savings and how he was afraid to tell his parents. The man listened carefully, nodding sympathetically. "I understand how you feel," the man said. "It's a terrible thing to go through. But don't worry, we'll get your money back. You just need to trust us." The boy nodded, trying to look relieved. "Thank you," he said. "I just want this to be over." The man smiled and leaned back in his chair. "Good," he said. "Now, there's just one more thing we need to do. We need you to transfer a small fee to cover the costs of recovering your money. Once we have that, we can start the process." The boy's heart sank. This was the moment he had been dreading. The investigators had warned him that the scammers would ask for money, but he hadn't expected it to happen so soon. He knew he couldn't give them anything, it would ruin the whole plan. I don't have any money left," the boy stammered, trying to sound desperate. "I gave everything to the scammers. I don't know what to do." The man's smile faded, and his eyes narrowed. "Are you sure?" he asked. "This is your only chance to get your money back." As he drifted off to sleep, the boy felt a sense of purpose. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: he was ready to face whatever came next. The next morning, the boy woke up with a knot in his stomach. Today was the day he would meet the scammers in person. The investigators had set up a meeting at a local coffee shop, and the boy was supposed to play his role as a victim who had been scammed. He felt nervous but determined. He knew this was his chance to make a real difference. As he got ready, he went over the plan in his head. He was supposed to act scared and vulnerable, like someone who had lost a lot of money and was desperate for help. The investigators had given him a script to follow, but they had also warned him to be ready for anything. The scammers were clever, and they might try to test him. When he arrived at the coffee shop, the boy spotted the man he had spoken to on the phone sitting at a corner table. He was dressed in a sharp suit and had a friendly smile, but the boy could see the coldness in his eyes. He took a deep breath and walked over to the table. "Hi," the boy said, trying to sound nervous. "Are you the person I spoke to on the phone?" The man smiled and gestured for him to sit down. "Yes, I am," he said. "Please, have a seat. I'm here to help you." The boy sat down, his hands trembling slightly. He could feel the man studying him, trying to figure out if he was genuine. He knew he had to be careful. One wrong move, and the whole plan could fall apart. The man began to ask questions, probing for details about the boy's supposed scam. The boy answered as best he could, sticking to the story the investigators had given him. He talked about how he had lost his savings and how he was afraid to tell his parents. The man listened carefully, nodding sympathetically. "I understand how you feel," the man said. "It's a terrible thing to go through. But don't worry, we'll get your money back. You just need to trust us." The boy nodded, trying to look relieved. "Thank you," he said. "I just want this to be over." The man smiled and leaned back in his chair. "Good," he said. "Now, there's just one more thing we need to do. We need you to transfer a small fee to cover the costs of recovering your money. Once we have that, we can start the process." The boy's heart sank. This was the moment he had been dreading. The investigators had warned him that the scammers would ask for money, but he hadn't expected it to happen so soon. He knew he couldn't give them anything, it would ruin the whole plan. I don't have any money left," the boy stammered, trying to sound desperate. "I gave everything to the scammers. I don't know what to do." The man's smile faded, and his eyes narrowed. "Are you sure?" he asked. "This is your only chance to get your money back." The next few days were tense for the boy. The investigators had warned him that the scammers might try to contact him again, and he needed to be ready. He carried a small recording device with him at all times, just in case, and he made sure to stay in close contact with the investigators. Every time his phone rang, his heart would skip a beat, wondering if it was the scammers on the other end. Finally, the call came. It was late in the evening, and the boy was sitting at his desk doing homework when his phone buzzed. He picked it up and saw an unknown number. His hands trembled as he answered. "Hello?" he said, trying to sound nervous. "It's me," the voice on the other end said. It was the man from the coffee shop. "We need to meet again. Tonight." The boy's heart raced. "Why?" he asked, trying to sound scared. "What's going on?" The man's voice was cold and impatient. "Just be at the park by the fountain in an hour. Don't be late." Before the boy could respond, the call ended. He sat there for a moment, his mind racing. He knew this was it, the moment he had been preparing for. He quickly called the investigators and told them what had happened. They assured him they would be nearby, watching and ready to step in if things went wrong. "Just stick to the plan," one of them said. "You'll be fine." The boy took a deep breath and got ready to leave. He told his parents he was going out for a walk, trying to sound casual. They didn't suspect anything, but he could feel the weight of what he was about to do pressing down on him. When he arrived at the park, it was dark and quiet. The fountain was lit up, casting a soft glow over the area. The boy spotted the man from the coffee shop standing nearby, his hands in his pockets. He looked calm, but the boy could sense the tension in the air. "You came," the man said as the boy approached. "Good. We need to talk." The boy nodded, trying to look scared. "What's going on?" he asked. "Why did you call me here?" The man stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "I know you're lying to me," he said. "I don't know who you're working with, but I know you're not who you say you are." The boy's heart pounded, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said. "I just want my money back." The man studied him for a moment, then sighed. "Fine," he said. "If you're telling the truth, then prove it. Come with me." He turned and started walking toward a nearby alley. The boy hesitated, unsure of what to do. He knew following the man into a dark alley was dangerous, but he also knew he couldn't back down now. He took a deep breath and followed the man, his hand gripping the recording device in his pocket. As they walked, the man began to talk, his voice low and menacing. "You think you're clever," he said. "But you're not. We've been doing this a long time, and we know how to spot a rat." The boy's heart was racing, but he kept his voice steady. "I'm not a rat," he said. "I just want my money back. Please, just help me." The man stopped and turned to face him. We'll see, he said. But if you're lying to me, you'll regret it. At that moment, the boy heard a noise behind him. He turned and saw two more men stepping out of the shadows. They looked rough, with hard eyes and clenched fists. The boy realized he was trapped. His mind raced, trying to figure out what to do. "What's going on?" he asked, trying to sound scared. "Why are they here?" The man from the coffee shop smiled coldly. "They're here to make sure you're telling the truth," he said. "Now, let's try this again. Who are you really working with?" The boy felt a surge of panic, but he knew he had to stay calm. "I'm not working with anyone," he said. "I just want my money back. Please, you have to believe me." The man studied him for a moment, then nodded to the other two men. They stepped forward, their expressions grim. The boy's heart was pounding, but he knew he couldn't give up. He had to keep playing his role, no matter what. "Please," he said, his voice trembling. "I don't know what you want from me. I just want this to be over." The man from the coffee shop sighed and shook his head. "Fine," he said. "If you're not going to talk, then we'll do this the hard way." He nodded to the other men, and they moved closer, their hands reaching for the boy. Just as they were about to grab him, there was a loud shout from the entrance of the alley. "Freeze! Police!" The boy turned and saw the investigators rushing toward them, their guns drawn. The scammers froze, their eyes wide with shock. "Hands up," one of the investigators shouted. "You're under arrest." The scammers hesitated for a moment, then slowly raised their hands. The boy felt a surge of relief as the investigators moved in and handcuffed the men. One of the investigators walked over to the boy and put a hand on his shoulder. "You did great," he said. "You stayed calm, and you gave us everything we needed." The boy nodded, still shaking. "Thanks," he said. "I was so scared." The investigator smiled. "You should be proud of yourself," he said. "You helped us take down a dangerous group of criminals. You've made a real difference." As the investigators led the scammers away, the boy stood there, trying to process everything that had happened. He had started out just trying to help an elderly couple with their groceries, and now he had helped bring down a criminal network. It was more than he had ever imagined, but he knew he had done the right thing. That night, as he lay in bed, the boy thought about everything that had happened. He felt a mix of emotions, relief, pride, and a sense of accomplishment. He had faced danger and come out on the other side, and he knew he had made a difference. As he drifted off to sleep, the boy felt a sense of peace. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for sure: he was ready to face whatever came next. The days that followed the arrest of the scammers were a whirlwind for the boy. The investigators kept him updated on the case, and he learned that the group he had helped take down was part of a much larger network. They had been operating for years, scamming vulnerable people out of millions of dollars. Thanks to the boy's bravery, the investigators had been able to gather enough evidence to shut down the entire operation. The boy felt a mix of pride and disbelief. He had never imagined that his small act of kindness, helping an elderly couple with their groceries, would lead to something so big. He had become a local hero, though he didn't feel like one. To him, he had just done what anyone would have done in his place. The elderly couple he had helped were overjoyed when they heard the news. They invited him over for tea and thanked him again for everything he had done. "You've changed our lives," the woman said, her eyes filled with tears. "We'll never forget what you did for us." The boy smiled, feeling a warm glow inside. "I'm just glad I could help," he said. "You've been so kind to me, and I wanted to do something to repay you." The man nodded, his expression serious. "You've done more than repay us," he said. "You've shown us that there's still good in the world. That's something we'll carry with us for the rest of our lives." As the boy left their house that evening, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. He had made a difference, not just for the couple, but for countless other people who had been targeted by the scammers. It was a feeling he would never forget. But even as he celebrated the success of the investigation, the boy couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. The investigators had told him that the scammers' network was much larger than they had initially thought, and there were still people out there who needed to be brought to justice. The boy knew he couldn't just walk away, not when there was still work to be done. A few days later, the investigators contacted him again. They had a new lead, and they wanted his help. "We know this is asking a lot," one of them said. "But you've already proven yourself. We think you're the best person for the job." The boy listened as they explained the plan. They had identified another group of scammers who were operating in a nearby town, and they needed someone to go undercover again. This time, the stakes were even higher. The group was more dangerous, and the investigators needed someone who could gain their trust quickly. The boy hesitated. He knew how risky it was, and he was still shaken from his last encounter with the scammers. But he also knew he couldn't say no. There were still people out there who needed help, and he had the chance to make a difference. "I'll do it," he said finally. "But I need to know you'll have my back." The investigators nodded. "We'll be with you every step of the way," one of them said. "You won't be alone." The boy spent the next few days preparing for his new mission. The investigators trained him on how to handle himself in dangerous situations, and they gave him a new identity to use. He practiced his role until he felt confident he could pull it off. Finally, the day came when he was ready to make contact with the new group of scammers. He drove to the nearby town and checked into a small motel, where he would be staying for the next few days. The investigators were nearby, watching and ready to step in if things went wrong. The boy's first task was to make contact with the scammers. He had been given a phone number to call, and he dialed it with trembling hands. A woman answered, her voice smooth and reassuring. The boy took a deep breath and began to speak, carefully following the script he had been given. "Hi, I'm calling because I think I've been scammed," he said, his voice trembling slightly. The woman listened carefully, then began to ask questions. The boy answered as best he could, trying to sound scared and vulnerable. It wasn't hard, he was nervous, and it showed in his voice. After a few minutes, the woman seemed convinced. "Don't worry," she said. "We'll help you get your money back. Just follow our instructions, and everything will be okay." The boy felt a surge of relief. He had done it, he had gained their trust. Over the next few days, the boy worked to gather information about the scammers. He met with them in person, pretending to be a desperate victim who had lost everything. He listened carefully as they talked, picking up on details that could help the investigators build their case. It was dangerous work, and the boy was constantly on edge. He knew that one wrong move could blow his cover, and he didn't want to think about what the scammers would do if they found out who he really was. But he kept going, driven by the knowledge that he was doing the right thing. Finally, after several tense days, the boy had gathered enough information for the investigators to make their move. They set up a sting operation, and the boy played his part perfectly. He lured the scammers into a trap, and the investigators moved in to arrest them. As the scammers were led away in handcuffs, the boy felt a mix of emotions. He was relieved that it was over, but he also felt a sense of pride. He had done it again, he had helped take down another group of criminals. The investigators congratulated him on a job well done. "You've made a real difference," one of them said. "You should be proud of yourself." The boy nodded, but he knew the work wasn't over yet. There were still scammers out there, and he was determined to keep fighting. As he drove home that evening, the boy thought about everything he had been through. He had started out just trying to help an elderly couple with their groceries, and now he was working with investigators to bring down criminal networks. It was more than he had ever imagined, but he knew he was doing the right thing.